For those of you not from Virginia, welcome to Virginia. We filmed the show Moonshiners here. Did you know that? That's our claim to fame. That's actually my zip code. I drove in from the western part of the state this morning, but I'm absolutely honored to be here, and I'm going to talk about the movement screen. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people mention it. You've probably seen it in the literature, but I want to take you back to the beginning. Where did this come from? Because the movement screen is literally as simple to execute as something like CPR. It's not an assessment or a medical evaluation. It's literally a screening tool. Now let's think about other screens, visual screens, blood pressure. The most important thing out of a blood pressure test is what category is this person in? Are they hypertensive or not? That's the first question. Why they're hypertensive is a question for another test, okay? And we have those tests. The movement screen lets you know, is somebody's movement ready for training, or do they need some form of correction? Here's where we drew the line. Not at this optimal movement, perfect flexibility, great core stability. Those are lofty things, and some people will never attain those perfect goals. And yet they'll never get an injury and they'll perform just fine, okay? We're not here to police perfection with movement. We're here to manage the minimums. What is the minimum level of flexibility you need to bring to this activity? What's the minimum level of core stability you need to bring to this activity? Because you can spend the rest of your life working on the other stuff, but I got to manage your minimums. So I think we've probably all seen the books out there that talk about expertise in a particular field. And in 1990, I became a strength coach and a physical therapist the very same year. So I've got one foot in each profession, sometimes grounded securely, sometimes on shaky ground. I literally have the capacity to break you down and rebuild you if I want to. I realized that exercise is nothing but the introduction of stress on a biological organism. Therefore, it can be destructive or constructive, can't it? We have been obsessive for the last 30 years about learning the perfect way to back squat, hang clean, do a depth jump. We can police your lunge like no one else can. We know how to talk about the stressor. We got the exercise rules down and we're damn good with it. But I see questions on the internet every day. What do you think of front squats? What do you think of back squats? For who? My grandma or your 18-year-old? And just because he's 18 doesn't mean he ought to be doing front squats. How does this person move? If they can't do a body weight squat with integrity and I load it, the motor systems of the brain assume that's as good as it gets, and they will learn to compensate and substitute because they think the squat is very important to survival. So if movement is optimized, load it. If there's a deficiency in movement and you load it with mileage, power, strength, eccentrics, or anything else that would be considered physical capacity, you will lock in the movement pattern at its substandard state. So I've gone basically into pro football teams and into tactical teams for the last 15 years saying, listen, I want you in the squat rack and I want you running your 5Ks. But if you do it anytime in the next 2 weeks while we're correcting this stuff, you're never going to make your goal. And so I always wind up having the conversation with the pro athlete or the strength coach or the athletic trainer. You remember the story of the tortoise and the hare? They're like, well, yeah, who won? Just because we're going slow on the front doesn't mean we're not going to be bringing it on the back end. But if I start you faster than you can handle, I will break you down, and we've statistically proven that you will break down. If your movement screen is below the cut, it ain't if, it's usually when you're going to have your problem. And then medical's going to get involved, and we're going to work backward. We're not going to know what the hell we're doing, okay? All we know is we got somebody who's been working out, they got pain, so we're going to do MRIs and x-rays and try to find a structural problem when it's very likely they had that structural problem when they were feeling good. And maybe that's we overloaded it, that's the problem. I've got to break down what's structural and what's functional, and I needed a system to help me do that. So in 1990, I graduated PT school and as a strength coach. And I started thinking, what do I have to do to become an expert as quick as possible? Everybody said you need your 10,000 hours or your 10 years or whatever. But I had to figure out what variable between rehabilitation and strength and conditioning was the most important variable. Program design, the ability to create a progression, exercise knowledge, knowledge of anatomy, all that stuff is absolutely important. And many of you have invested quite a bit of education in that. But I took a different tack. I'm going to set myself up to do as many assessments and evaluations as possible in the next 10 years. So when I was in physical therapy, I had a lot of therapists I worked with that didn't like doing evaluations. They really liked doing soft tissue work and ultrasounds. Fine, I'll do your evaluation for you. I worked with a lot of strength coaches that didn't really understand biomechanics, but they knew a lot about lifting, and so we'd go in and do some biomechanical testing and help them put the right program on the right person. I positioned myself to see and evaluate significantly more people than I could ever train or rehabilitate. For every one person I treated or trained, I did 5 evaluations. So by 1996, I'm looking at things different because I realize we're not capturing bad patterns of behavior. We see somebody who can't balance on one leg, we say glute medius. Oh, the glute medius is weak. I challenge you, go do this for 2 months with that person, see if single leg stance gets better. Don't bring me kinesiology 101, I taught that, okay? It doesn't change. We're interacting with a sensory motor system. And let me tell you, every one of you in here is working with people under physical stress. Your job is to physically stress them, to raise them above the capacity that they would ever be stressed so they won't break down when they're doing what they do. So we got people under stress and we're hired to stress them. We got to know who can handle the stress and adapt and come out of it better. And we got to know beforehand who our stress is potentially going to hurt. And guess what? Most of those people can be back in the program in 2 to 3 weeks. I'm not saying most of those people need rehab, and I'm not saying most of those people need to be on a little purple band for 3 weeks. We're going to correct them. We're going to give them body weight challenges, and we're going to point them at their worst pattern. They are their own resistance. And we're going to make them correct that. And what we see is physical capacity goes through the roof. Not because we've changed fiber, not because we're storing more glycogen, because we got more efficient. We got the hip flexor out of the way and now your T-spine is mobile. So bottom line efficiency creates better learning pathways. I need your ankles mobile, not because we're going into an ankle mobility sport. I need your ankles mobile so your frickin' glutes will fire. And I need your glutes firing so your back won't work so hard. And the way we do this is we get their movement above a legitimate cut, and their movement learning pathways are open. So the movement screen's not about flexibility, and it's not about core stability. These are just simple things that a lot of people talk about on the surface. It lets me know, is your body ready to learn movement? There are certain tests I would do before I would take you into visual performance, right? I'd check your vision first. 20/20 vision, now we're going to work on peripheral and quick acquisition and reaction time. If you were in basically a light-deprived environment, I had to teach you how to use your ears significantly better, the first thing I got to take off the table is a hearing problem, right? Well, if I'm going to train your movement, the first thing I got to take off the table is a movement problem that's going to inhibit your learning pathway. That's why we do movement screening. That is the #1 reason we do movement screening. Will it assist with program design? Absolutely. Will it tell you who's at risk for an injury? Potentially. Will it help you coordinate better proactive treatment with your medical staff? Absolutely. But the #1 reason we do movement screening is to see if this person's body can learn what we're getting ready to teach them under stress and load. So that's what I talk about in movement when we talk about looking at things differently. Let's not talk about exercise anymore for 1 year. Let's talk about who we're dropping it on, because every one of them's different. You can still platoon your problems. I got 100 people, I movement screen them all. They become 5 platoons. I got a hip hinging platoon over here that doesn't know how to hip hinge. I got a T-spine mobility platoon over here. They are challenging each other to get better on their deficiencies. I got competition working for me. They're all getting smoked because a corrective strategy, when you can't do it, is actually conditioning. We got you up against your worst pattern. Too many smart people disagreed on movement topics like exercise, rehabilitation, athletic performance. I realized it was a question of perspective. We all got to see the same thing. If we can find the movement problem and identify it and categorize it, you can bring kettlebells. She can bring body weight. We can bring yoga, Pilates, mixed martial arts, pre-training. We can do all that and change movement. But let's not talk about it, okay? Because if you did it, it's not bragging. So set a baseline, inject what you know to that baseline. If you change movement, put a check mark, that changed that. And if you didn't change movement, own it. You just learned something, all right? Every time you make a mistake, you get smarter. Every time you don't, you just get a little more confident. Check this out. You know what horse prospectors are? They're the people that go to Churchill Downs, Kentucky Derby, and basically they call the horse race before it happens. They predict things. Strength coaches and physical rehabilitation people have to predict things all the time. How's this person going to do? How are they going to fare? How's their rehab going? Are they ready for activity? We got to predict things all the time. Some of us get paralysis by analysis. We do too many damn tests. We don't know what our opinion is. Some of us don't believe in tests. We're going through on pure intuition and experience. There is a middle path. Do tests that give you confidence. So a study was done with the horse prospectors. When they analyze which horse is going to win a race, they usually look at 50 pieces of data. They need that 50 pieces of data. They stake their reputation on the line, 50 pieces of data. So the researchers challenged them. You only got 5 pieces of data, but you can pick the 5 you look at. I want you to call this hypothetical horse race. They ran the algorithm. They said, now you got 10 pieces of data. Now 20, 30. Now you got your original data. Every time the horse prospectors got more data, guess what happened to their confidence level? It went up. Guess what happened to their ability to predict outcomes? Exactly the same. The 5 pieces of data they picked were the only 5 they really used to determine where they were going anyway. The other stuff was just a security blanket. It's because we did it yesterday. They're tests that don't determine what you do next, so don't do them. They complicate things. The test has to justify itself. You don't have to justify the test, okay? So the confidence level went up, but the effectiveness didn't. Don't ever put yourself in that position professionally. I've been in that position many times, and I never wanted to be in that position again. So if I'm going to do a test, it's going to give me direction, it's going to give me insight to programming, it's going to let me know if I got a time bomb or I'm not doing the test. Because I don't ever want my confidence level to exceed my effectiveness. We can't let that happen. I got to look at movement differently, but how am I going to do this? And I realized most of us who really get movement go straight to evaluation and skip over the screening process. Here's what happens. The people who need you most don't get your attention. When we screen, we quickly put people in categories. I need a lot of attention over here. Something's getting ready to happen. It just hadn't happened yet. We need a modification here. They just need to run till they puke. They'll be fine. I need those 3 categories because I can leverage my expertise. You've got to do that. People are more divergent than they've ever been. Different movement types are going to bite you if you don't look at them differently. It's a wonderful book out called Start With Why. Most of us know what we do. We don't know why we do it at the level you think you need to. I realized in 1996 we had advanced everything in fitness and rehabilitation over the last 30 years. But largely the way we assessed and made decisions about program design or rehabilitation had not changed. Now riddle me this. The advances we've recently made in breast cancer and prostate cancer are not in treatment, it's early detection, okay? We spend twice as much every year on low back pain than we do cardiovascular issues. Now wait a second. Cardiovascular issues are signs and symptoms associated with cardiovascular disease. Back pain is a friggin' symptom. I didn't say it was a disc. I didn't say it was a spondylolisthesis. I didn't say it was a stress fracture. I said back pain. It hasn't even been diagnosed yet, and yet it's got its own category. Now, how much early detection do we have for cardiovascular problems? Awesome. I can put your mom on medication. She's asymptomatic. But her triglyceride level, her cholesterol, or her hypertension tells me I can be proactive. I can put her on a medical regime with no symptoms at all. Do you have that capacity with musculoskeletal stuff? Or do you wait till the injury happens and work backward and say, well, I think their obliques weren't firing? You going to stake your career on that? I don't want to stake my career on that anymore, because we got to look as smart as the people that are detecting breast cancer early, prostate cancer, diabetes in kids. We got to be that good with musculoskeletal injuries, because they're robbing us blind. You shouldn't get hurt in training. Get hurt if you play, but don't get hurt in training. Knowing too much about exercise and not enough about the individual that's getting it is how we got here, and we can get back out. Don't defend it, just own it. The female ACL epidemic is through the roof, and we haven't put a dent in it. We haven't put a dent in it. We've been combating childhood diabetes and obesity for 15 years now. We haven't put a dent in it. We got to come at it different, or we can't change it. Little history for you here. We got gyms today that are spending a lot of money to look like that. They're getting rid of the machines, and there's no freaking where to sit, and I love it. However, you can't just pick up a kettlebell and whip it around. You can't just climb a rope or whip around those Indian clubs and medicine balls. There is technique, precision, loading, and movement to consider. So it's not enough to pick up an old school exercise and just do it. We got to own it, because I tell you what, the people who used to frequent that gym did not go to that gym for a workout. They didn't have heart rate monitors, and they weren't trying to reduce belly fat. They were trying to learn the skill of climbing a rope. They were trying to learn the precision of Indian club swinging. They were trying to learn the alignment needed to really do kettlebells like a master. The workout was the side effect of skill acquisition in a specific movement. Ever thought about that? The workout is the side effect. The physical changes of the body are a side effect of learning more discipline in movement. And there's only two ways that I can see to look at movement: competency and capacity. Capacity is how much load I can put on you. Competency, can you move through your own dimensions? Single leg stance isn't a capacity issue, it's a competency issue, okay? I didn't say how many single leg squats can you do, I said can you balance on one foot? What should come first? If I can't balance, why am I training single leg squats? Balance comes first. So we got to address all the competencies before we exploit the capacities. And that's what the screen does. It draws that line for us. That's bad for your knees, guys. Don't ever do that again. It wasn't a problem when people could squat. It's only a problem when people can't squat anymore. Those people are laying backward on their heel. Not the most flexible person in the class, the entire class. Guys, we don't move the same way we used to. We're bigger, fatter, and better fed, but we don't move as well as we used to. We've been lowering minimum standards in the military since about 65 just to get enough people to serve. Statistically, go back to any discipline where we got to have more people, and we will lower physical standards before we'll ever ask the question, what the hell's happening to us? 1954, we compared ourselves to the kids in Europe, okay? Bunch of kids went through the Krauss-Weber test for minimum muscular fitness. 57.9% of American children failed that test. Whether you agree with those tests or not, I don't think we should be flunking them and another part of the world is passing them. That's a problem. It's a big problem. You flip forward 10 years, those same kids in America that had no core stability at 8 are making us lower standards. You see that? The current administration thinks childhood obesity is a problem. They just need to get out there and move more. Did you ever think if they could move, they would? When people derive pleasure from movement, they do more of that. And when people don't derive pleasure from movement, they don't do that. Our company line is first move well, then move often. It doesn't work in reverse. And if you can move well, often takes care of itself. That's our mission statement. That's our why statement. I'm not in the exercise business or the testing business. If we got a better way to look at movement 3 years from now than that screen, I hope I get to be the one that delivers it to you. Because that's simply a compass. I think we'll have a GPS one day. But I'm not waiting for the GPS. I'm going to use the compass expertly right now and let the profession develop. Where did the movement screen come from? It didn't come from my background as an Olympic weightlifting coach or a strength coach. It came from what I learned in physical therapy school about the neurodevelopmental progression. What do you do first, walk or crawl? Movement Brain 101 likes to roll, prone on elbows, crawl, creep, kneel, squat, and stand. I didn't say stand and squat. How do we teach the squat to everybody? What position they start from? All right, first time you ever squatted, you weren't up here. You were down there. That's how you got here. We teach the squat in reverse simply because people can't screw it up that much. I didn't say we loaded them. I got to teach people to squat. I have taught NFL players to squat again because they've lost it due to bad mechanics, overloading when they shouldn't, or an injury that was prematurely discharged. We lose patterns all the time and never realize it because your brain is designed to compensate. You got a rock in your shoe and a pit bull right there, guess what? You're going to have a bad gait pattern, but you won't get your bit, okay? At some point when the pit bull's gone, I recommend taking the rock out of the shoe. So I played hurt all my life because that's what you do on game day. But you don't train hurt, and ibuprofen is not a breakfast food. I know these things, okay? How about movement patterns and fundamental development? When a baby skips one of these patterns and doesn't regain it, there's usually a little thumbprint on them where their balance is compromised or their stability or their mobility is compromised. So all I'm really doing is taking trained people who either have never been injured and are ready to train, or maybe recovering from an injury ready to train. I put them through a gauntlet that looks way more like what a baby can do than what a tactical person can do. And I get movement competency first. Because we know how to amp their capacity. We know how to drop stress. And we know how to dose that stress out so people grow and adapt, not so they go backward. This is how we find it out. Now, if you want to see a perfect squat, find a 3-year-old. That's all you got to do. You don't have to find a martial artist, and you don't have to find a biomechanist. Find a 3-year-old. Everybody in this room had a perfect squat. And something happened. If you continue to use that deep squat throughout your life, you would continue to possess it. Are some people anatomically predisposed to be slightly better squatters? Absolutely. And as you can see, I am not anatomically predisposed to be a marathon runner. I just can't do it. I just poke holes in the ground, okay? But I can run a little bit. And that's my point. We see somebody that can't squat, and you are absolutely ready to debate femur length and torso length with me, and I can have that person squatting better in about 10 minutes. Why did we even spend time debating? Now, when we hit their limit, we might see a squat that's not good enough to load heavily. And you're like, well, how am I going to train them if I can't squat them? You can lunge them, you can deadlift them, you can do a lot of stuff. Maintain the squat, train the patterns they got, okay? Don't let that squat get any worse. But we don't load a pattern that's broken. All you do is add to that problem. So we got movement screening, and if movement screening shows big left-right differences, an injury that was never completely rehabilitated, or a huge weakness on one side, we can basically do functional goniometry, the Y balance test. It's in the back of the movement book. Do it for the upper quarter, not the shoulder, the upper quarter or the lower quarter. That's not a hip test, it's not a balance test, it's not an ankle test. It's a quarter test, okay? Incorporating the core, the pelvis, the whole lower extremity. The upper Y. And then if we've got pain on any of these movements, we go into a medical assessment and we break it down. So remember this, screen, test, assess. Always screen, test, assess. Where do our rehab people use movement screening? Not on intake. They're already hurting. So they need an evaluation. We got to get a diagnosis. Where they're hurting may not be where their problem is. And we're learning more and more about that every day in musculoskeletal medicine, okay? First order of business, When I discharge you from rehabilitation, I do a movement screen to check my work. Movement screen is a moderate threshold test. A medical assessment's a low threshold test. I at least got to do a moderate threshold test to check my work. Now, if we're finished with rehab, but you have dysfunction, meaning I got you out of pain, but you still can't balance on one leg, I can easily communicate with your trainer now and say, listen, we got an issue. They don't have full green light till they can balance on that leg, but they don't need to come to clinic anymore. They can work on that over there. But I'm telling you, I don't want to see them in a squat rack until they got equal balance on each leg. Otherwise, you're going to be coaching them out of a shift that you could have fixed just by getting their balance back. Now, when we're logistically implementing training modules for people, when we're putting together programs and when we're trying to change movement, we can't get sucked into logistic errors. You got to back away from your profession, and you got to look at it as an outsider. Okay? Seriously. I went to PT school. I came back eventually to my hometown. Bunch of tobacco farmers in Pennsylvania County, bunch of young athletes. I can't put heat on you because you can do that at home. You drove a half hour to see me. If half your time seeing me is laying on a hot pack, you can do that at home. Where's my expertise there? If you need more circulation, I can get it on a bike, I can get it through a hot pack, but that's not the therapy. That's the preparation, okay? The E-stem's not the therapy. That's the preparation. I'm managing the chemical stuff in your body, but I got to address the mechanical stuff. So I got sucked into sort of doing it because everybody else did it. This is the way we've always done it. We always put heat on people and blah, blah, blah. No, I'm going to question everything, every step of the way, just because I want to be annoying to myself and other people. I got to do that. And these two books talk about how we've made logistical errors in aviation, medicine, first response. And they talk about people who are unwilling to acknowledge or scrutinize their outcomes. Okay? You start looking at your outcomes before anybody else does, you will always be employed, and a lot of people will be asking you for advice. If you try to hide your outcomes, or if you're not interested in your outcomes or hope nobody else notices, it's getting tighter out there. Outcomes are what it's about, okay? Don't look at my workouts, look at my outcomes. You may disagree with some of my workouts, some of my exercise choices. You may disagree with nonlinear training or the way I teach a deadlift. You are welcome to do that. Let's compare outcomes. Let's compare outcomes. That has been driving every decision I've made last 15 years. And it's a hard pill to swallow because sometimes my outcomes don't look good. But I'm the first one to know about it. And I'm the first one to make a correction. The book Blink, Malcolm Gladwell, talks about expertise and what it takes to get there. And it's a little bit more than just the 10,000 hours thing. Advanced pattern recognition is a word that came up in that book, whether we're talking about the stock market or identifying biological processes. The movement screen is capturing bad patterns. It's not designed to explain why they're occurring. You do another test for that. But the first test I got to do is capture people with bad patterns. What are the reasons people can have a bad movement pattern? Mobility problem. They're stiff in a joint or in the soft tissue. Got it. What if they don't have any stiffness? It's probably stability or motor control. Okay? Is that a weakness problem down here or a processing problem up here? We don't know, but I can test it in 3 moves. I can tell you if they're wobbly because their legs are weak or they're wobbly because they don't have a good connection. If their legs are weak, we know how to train them. If they don't have a good connection, I'm going to introduce you to a balance beam. It's going to be wide today and slightly more narrow tomorrow. And in most cases, if your mobility is okay, then I will dose your stabilization, not in sets and reps and side planks. I will give you obstacles because babies don't do sets and reps. Babies don't get strong, but they're mobile and stable. By the time they're 8, 9, or 10, they're ready for some strength. But we don't train mobility and stability the way we train strength. And we don't train stabilizer muscles the way we train prime movers. That's why using sets and reps on a rotator cuff or a TA don't really make a lot of sense. They're literally slow twitch muscles, even though they're the first muscles to fire and protect the joints they cross. Most of the work stabilizers do happens at 20% of their MVO, okay? Their maximum voluntary work is about 20%. Therefore, a stabilizer does its job not because it's strong, but because it's frickin' fast. Well, how do we make stabilizers fast? Get the pathways open. How do we get the pathways open? Make sure mobility is adequate. Because most of your stabilization is happening at the reflex level, at the spinal cord. You're not even thinking about balancing on the beam, you're balancing on the beam. Because I pulled your friggin' shoes off and let your feet feel it for a minute, shoes back on next week, see if you got the same balance. It's not about getting your shoes on and off, it's about getting the information in, you make the right decision, and then we throw a pack on you, then we put your boots back on you, pathways are open. We reestablished learning. Experts in any field are able to accurately and quickly identify patterns, while novices stumble through the process and don't recognize the salient features of things. I train therapists and strength coaches all the time. You don't want to get caught up in the data, and you don't want to do more tests that can give you direction. It will simply reduce your effectiveness, and so you gotta go basically through checklists. There's a great book out called Checklist Manifesto, written by a surgeon. Now let me ask you this. When we first introduced movement screening on the fitness world, on the rehabilitation world, on the performance world, we had a lot of people saying, I know movement. I don't need a checklist. Pilots know how to fly, and surgeons know how to cut, and paramedics know how to save lives. And these three professions use checklists 85% of the day. Does it mean that their education is not adequate, or they're not free thinkers? Or has history and evidence prove that this checklist will keep you out of trouble? It minimizes human error, and it saves your brain for the important decisions that a checklist can't help you with. So you think a pilot is wild about a checklist? It is a mind-numbing list of data on a clipboard. It insults their intelligence, and yet they do it every day. I thank God they do. I fly a lot. Are we smarter than them? We're not. Are we smarter than surgeons? Are we smarter than paramedics? Where's your checklist? Okay? If I got somebody who's not sleeping 4 hours a night, their biggest issue isn't the way I'm training them. It's the way they're recovering. If I got somebody who's not getting enough protein, it's not the way I'm training them. It's what their metabolism and energy systems are doing. They can't repair the tissue I'm breaking down. My job on any job is to find the weakest link. In many cases, I've gone into a professional football franchise and deleted more exercises than I added. Because basically training, if you come at it from a different angle, is an economist. Economy's got nothing to do with finance. Economy is about the management of scarce resources. Is training time a scarce resource? Is it? Yeah. Then you've got to manage it. Tim Ferriss, the guy who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week and the 4-Hour Body, interviewed me for the longest chapter in the 4-Hour Body. He's a big fan of the 80-20 rule, which basically says that 80% of the result that you're getting is due to about 20% of the effort that you're making. I didn't say 100%, I said 80%. So, in theory, I could go into both my program and any one of your programs and systematically delete things and free up more time for the things that are making the big differences. But without setting baselines, I can't tell you what I'm going to do for your population. We've got to take a sample, we got to recon the territory. And then I can tell you how to apply the economy of exercise. Don't do a move if it ain't going to foster adaptability, change competency or capacity. We don't do moves that don't give us what we want. The exercises, just like the test, must justify themselves. So I implore you, whether you basically adopt what we're talking about or you go in another direction, get a standard operating procedure and stick with it for a year. You will know where you are in your profession significantly better by doing the same thing. Many of us do the same thing on exercise, but we assess and evaluate people differently every month. I would prefer you mix up the exercises and stick with a standard intake. Don't veer from it for 1 year. If you're not better at the end of the year, drop it. If you are, own it, you're probably going to get a promotion. That's the movement screen. And it was very important for me to talk about this, the why of the movement screen, because it's a very simple test. We're going to knock one down in about 10 minutes here, but I don't want you analyzing the test incorrectly. That's not supposed to predict performance. If I want to know the best frickin' athlete in the room, usually I already do, and I already know the tests that are going to give me that. But if you think about it, the first prerequisite of performing better is being present. And if you can't pass that, statistics say you won't be present for the performance, okay? So I'm all about performance work. And when we first came out with the movement screen, I did not want to get labeled one of those soft rehab guys that think I can train unbelievably well-conditioned athletes with a BOSU and a red band. That ain't me at all. I went through the RKC at 40 and didn't pull any strings. I had to do all the tests myself. I wasn't prepared to talk about kettlebells till I was certified in it. I didn't talk about Pilates till I was certified in the mat work. I didn't talk about Olympic weightlifting till I got certified as a coach. So I went through all these journeys, not just as a broken down ex-football player, but also scrutinizing how can we pull dumbbell or unilateral or kettlebell training into this? Does it add something the straight bar doesn't give us? Every one of these things was scrutinized not by my opinion or the equipment I had. I just basically said, what's the best tool for the job? But I wasn't prepared to scrutinize that tool, talk about it, hold it up, or knock it down until I was an expert in that tool. And I think that's a challenge for all of us to do, is looking at new tools. As you can see, the movement screen isn't necessarily positioned to measure movement as much as it is to rate and rank movement. Find your weakest link, your bad pattern. I can condition you in any pattern that scores a 2 or a 3 and has symmetry. So I can drop it on you in one pattern, but not in the other. And that is where I think I want to deliver probably the best message I can to you. We used to think core stability was about anatomy. And in the next minute, I'm going to prove to you it's not. I can put EMGs on my abs, my back extensors, my glutes, and I can do a squat. And I can show you an EMG signature of how my abs contribute in that pattern. And I can show you a pretty good squat. But I can take the same person, wire them up and go single leg stance and show you their abs just don't fire in single leg stance. They got the same anatomy they had a minute ago, but the pattern dictates how you're going to fire it. So if I side plank you, I'm going to get better abs in side planking, but I may not get better abs in fighting or balancing on a beam. That's my point. So what we got to do is look at the basis of patterns. So if you look up at the top of the screen when I had the movement screen up there, let's go back. Symmetrical stance, single leg stance, asymmetrical stance. Everything you're doing and everything is coming off of those 3 foot positions. But long before babies get up on their feet, they get their quarters mobile. Lower quarter mobility, upper quarter mobility. Long before babies ever push up or plank, they got to crawl. This right here, this test, lets me know, are your small, inner, deep core muscles working? The push-up test lets me know if you've got some armor on the outside. One's not more important than the other, but one comes before the other. So if we movement screen somebody and they flunk these 2 tests, I'm going straight for mobility until it changes. They pass these 2 tests, flunk these tests, I'm going for stability, and they don't go on their feet. Okay? Not because they can't, because I'm going to cover up a problem that I could easily uncover right here. Okay? Then we go to the feet, and then we train, and we got the patterns. So we systematically deconstruct that and put them in categories. Okay? The only thing that won't get you a training program through the movement screen is if you have pain on one of the patterns. Pain on the pattern means we got to diagnose you. So unless we already know the diagnosis and are already working within that scope of training, we got to find out why your shoulder hurts. Is it a trigger point, a bursitis, or are you getting ready to tear your cuff? I can't answer that question with this information. But 10 minutes from now, I can answer that question for you. Why are we so reluctant to give somebody that 10 minutes that deserves it? Because a lot of people show up at the screen saying, I am cleared, I don't have pain with exercise, I want a screen. And we got a 20 to 25% fail rate due to pain. These are positions we're going to put them in when we train them or practice them anyway. I got to find that out before we load these people. Okay? So don't overcomplicate the screen. In one day, we can have your reliability on the screen as good as your reliability is on CPR. If you want to know why we've got the rules in the screen the way we do, you can see them on the website, but I think it's better just to see it in action. Let me ask you something. When you're taking someone's blood pressure, do you envision the valves of the heart and the vena cava and the one-way valves in the veins? Are you envisioning how the heart works and how basically the right side is pumping blood to the lungs and the left side is going over the whole body? Or are you just pretty much waiting for the blood pressure cuff to give you what you need and move on? If you stare at this movement screen, trying to figure out what somebody's L4-5 is doing, or if they have an anteverted hip, or if they're pronating too much, you're missing the point. Do me a favor. Watch that and get so good you can go through this as quick as Mike Contreras, because the numbers will tell you if it needs to be looked at further. I would be glad to watch any movement in the world and debate it with you, but basically that's over a beer and that's hypothetical. We've got to stick with standard operating procedure, and we got to do stuff that the evidence says is already working before we make up our own test, okay? I got lucky in 1996. I'd like to think I brought a little bit of expertise to it with all the evaluations I did, but I got lucky with the movement screen because I said if I can do it and it's not reliable or reproducible, then it's not going to help you a bit. It just makes me a little bit of a guru, and that really wasn't the mission statement here. If we're going to change the world moves, we got to change the way we see movement first. If we see it different, we'll make it different. So here's what we're going to do. Yep, Mike, if you got somebody, we're going to run through a movement screen, and if I got time at the end, we can answer questions about why. But you've got the rules of movement screening there, and you can reinvestigate them on the website. He is only working with her. He's not acknowledging you. I'm going to tell you what he's doing as he's doing it. He's going to do the squat test first. Out of this can only come 4 outcomes. She does the squat and experiences pain, at which time we score 0. Or he's going to get her set up and analyze the squat. Now you guys can score this on a smartphone or a pad. You get certified in the screen. The first benefit of certification is you get a sweet app. Deep squat's right there. But you're new at it, you want to do it, and you forget what to say. The script is right here. You swipe it, they don't know that you're reading off a script. You got to say it this way or say it quick, and they squat right. There's the criteria you're looking for, and you move to the next test. Okay? So he's going to score her really quick. The kit gives us standard operating procedure. Okay? The neat thing about this test is she's being tested within her own dimensions. When we look at her shoulder mobility, it is based on the length of her hand. Okay? First time we let her squat without the heel lift. Second time we let her squat with the heel lift. Now we take some anatomical things. She's going to step over a hurdle that's not an arbitrary length. It's the length of her tibial height. Optimal running mechanics often use a body marker to tell you what your optimal stride is. Because for somebody trying to improve speed, is it RPMs or stride length? Which one do I work on first? If you've got an optimal stride, we work on RPMs. If you can only lift your leg that high, I think we're going to hit mobility first. RPMs don't matter. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a question while Mike's doing his work here. This is a hurdle step test. First question of the day. Is this a mobility or stability test? Yes. Are we testing the right leg mobility or the left leg stability? Yes. If she's faulty on one side, are we going to blame the side that's down or the side that's up? Yes, because in this, we are not looking at anatomical parts. She is a whole person. We're looking at a pattern. So, left leg going over, if she flunks that, kicks over the hurdle, does horribly, On my thing, I say left hurdle step. I've captured a pattern. If we want to break it down and find out if it's the stance leg or the moving leg, we can do that at a later point. But it's more important to capture that. Because let's say you got an exercise that's going to help her right leg stability. Do the exercise, bring her back. You got your feedback. You just became a better coach, a better trainer, a better rehab specialist, okay? But you got to take this feedback first. So you can hypothesize why she's not balancing and stepping well, but until you revisit the test, you won't see it. Hurdle step, you forget the script, swipe the screen. You forget the criteria, swipe the screen. Call it like you see it. When in doubt, score low. Give them the best of 3 attempts. That's all you got to do. It's about getting numbers on the page. Once they're on the page, we deal with them in the compartments and we program them accordingly. The script for lunging. The script for scoring. Even though we do the movement screen in a systematic order, starting standing and reducing you down to a lower level position, that is not the way we analyze the score. The hierarchy or priority of my consideration starts with mobility, your leg raise and your shoulder mobility. We name these tests for the client or the athlete or the patient, not for you. Our shoulder mobility test incorporates scapular movement, T-spine mobility, T-spine extension, neck stability, and back posture. To get that test, you got to have all that, not just a good glenohumeral joint. We call it shoulder mobility so the athlete will know what they're doing. Not so you'll think it's just a shoulder test, and if you flunk it, all you need to do is a bunch of shoulder mobility work to show you we're looking at an entire quarter. Take this lunge test, for instance. A lot of unbelievably fast and explosive people have difficulty with that. What does this mean in athletics or cutting, turning, and agility work? If you can't get your center of gravity low on this test, there's a good chance it's not happening at speed. Better to fix this than worry about it at speed, okay? We're staying body relative. There's the script, shoulder mobility, measure her hand length, make it anatomically correct. The criteria, right here. Now with 3 of our tests, we have a clearing screen. The clearing screen is not scored by the tester. It is simply pass, fail. Do you have pain with this move? We're going to do an impingement test for the shoulder. Does it tell us you got a cuff? No. It just tells us you got impingement. What could it be? It could be a subacromial bony abnormality. It could be a bursa. It could be a rotator cuff. Or it could be simply a tight lat and trigger point. It's important to know who's got impingement. You do a bunch of overhead work with people who got impingement. It's not if, it's when the shoulder problem presents. I can have shoulder impingement off the table for about 80% of the people in a week just by getting them warmed up, and sometimes not even by touching the shoulder, simply by getting T-spine mobility. It's all connected. It's not just a cliche. Leg raise. We're going to hold the bottom leg down. We're going to pick the top leg up. If all you see is a hamstring test, step up. You're not a freshman anymore. Psoas, tight on the down leg. Okay? Tight hip flexor on the down leg. Tilts my pelvis anteriorly. If I start this test with my pelvis anteriorly and my low back arched up, how high am I going to lift my leg? They will feel the tension on the up leg. It'll feel like they got a tight hamstring. They're going to scream for you to stretch their hamstring. It's because they don't have extension on the down leg. So, when they flunk this test, active straight leg raise, is it mobility on the up leg, mobility on the down leg, or stability in the core? Yes. Okay? We got to capture it first. And you bring your exercise to that. You can use our correctives, your correctives, a mix. But at some point, there's the judge right there. You go back to the judge. Did you change it? Now, what we often know is when somebody scores very poorly on this test, in about 10 minutes, you can have them adequate, not optimal. But if I can get you to a 2 on the active straight leg raise, you're cleared for deadlifting. So as soon as we hit a 2, we're going to deadlift. Because when I add length, I got to add strength. or you won't hold the length. As soon as you get a new pattern, we're going to give you a little conditioning on top of that, emphasize motor learning. We're going to give you something and make you use it. Now, next sessions, 2 days later, you've been goofing off, you didn't do your homework. You come in, your leg raise is low again. Guess what? We're only 10 minutes away from deadlifting. Third time, you're getting the clue. You did a little bit of homework. Now it only takes 5 minutes to get you to deadlifting. 17 days later, you walk in, show me a leg raise, we hit the deadlift, you never have to stretch again. That is how this goes. That's how the human brain works. We all know static stretching doesn't work. You've got tight hamstrings, you're going to stretch them today and they're going to be right back there tomorrow. It's what you do in the 30-minute window of improved mobility that brings them back more, brings them back better. You emphasize a little homework when they're done and say, hey, I'm not going to ask you whether you did your homework. I'll know, okay? Oh, I did my corrective exercises. No, you don't have to tell me. I'm not interested in that. I'll know in 5 seconds because you don't have to repeat the movement screen when you see somebody. Every person who does this is going to have probably a deficiency. Let's say a person has 4 deficiencies, okay? They can't squat, they can't lunge, they can't hurdle step, and they can't leg raise. Leg raise is the easiest one to get. It's the most primitive pattern. It's the first thing they ever did. I'm going to attack that pattern first. Here's what you're going to find out. There's a little alchemy there. I fixed the leg raise. Hurdle step just got better. Lunge isn't as wobbly. Squat's not coming around. I just got a 2-for-1. I worked on 1 test. I fixed 2 more. The only thing I got on the table now is a squat. So there is a hierarchy. At any given time, I'm only working on the lowest common denominator pattern. So you flunk every test on the movement screen, we're still only working on 1 pattern because that's the window to the next pattern, which is the window to the next pattern. And if you look deeply into that and you happen to have a kid at home, you're watching that happen. They use their mobility and they become stable. They become stable, they get on their feet. They get on their feet, they get strong. And every time somebody gets injured or gets taken out of action, you got to go through that process again. If the test says you can skip a step, skip a step. If the test says you can't skip a step, don't skip a step. We made this mobile app basically as a gesture to the NFL Combine because they've been using the movement screen in the Combine. But here's the thing that I want to make sure that we do. Don't read too much into the score and don't read too little into the score. Every one of you has a different population, you have different equipment, you got different time allocation, and you got a different level of injuries and or performance you're dealing with, okay? So here's what happens. You put the numbers in, we actually generate a report. It's wide open, you can program around it. You get a 1 on a pattern, we're going to tell you to focus on correction, quality, and competency. You get a 2 or 3 on a pattern, we're going to say, go, hit it, train them. But watch the screen. The minute you exchange strength or endurance and reduce movement quality, that's when the body got overloaded. Now think about this. You got somebody with an adequate movement screen. It's acceptable. No red lights, no yellow lights, they're good to go. You start hitting them hard. You movement screen them at the end of the training cycle. Their movement screen went down, okay? Bench press went up, can't wash my back without a loofah now, okay? Is that a good exchange? Because I know plenty of guys who have great shoulder mobility and an unbelievable bench press. If you take a shortcut learning the bench press, you're going to give up mobility to get strength. Strength ain't stability. You compromise your rotator cuff too. So the minute we train somebody so hard, at the end of a cycle we got speed is up and back squat is up, but I lost 4 points on the movement screen. If that doesn't take me below the cut, it may be a good exchange, but if that takes me below the cut, you just compromise their durability. So a good way to scrutinize how much load, how much stress somebody can take, like NASCAR, man. Okay. Okay, so 2 things. Active straight leg raise was a 1. I can't deadlift her today, and she just saw a video with kettlebell swings in it, and we can't do that either. Now, I'll throw you under the bus. How long before you got her to 2s?
It'll take me a couple minutes. Want me to fix it?
Yeah, fix it. Go ahead. We got We got 12 minutes to correct this. I think we can do it. We're in NASCAR country. Just pull into the pit. We'll fix this thing for you. We're going to go back, make sure we got ones, but here's the question that you should be asking me. Oh, you got a correction. She's got a little more flexibility. I could have done that. How long is it going to last? Hopefully to the end of this session. After that, I don't care what, because she could have lost her leg raise last month because of a little back tightness, or she could have never had it to begin with. I don't have her history. But I do know if we get that leg raise up to a set of 2s, that we can do some deadlifts. If she has really good form on deadlifts, I might make her third set of deadlifts single leg deadlifting from an elevated platform. I may make her use every bit of that mobility we got. Now, whatever drill gets her leg raise better in 3 minutes, here's what I'm going to say. Tomorrow's a rest day for you. You don't have to work out, but I got your leg raise better in 3 minutes. I need 3 minutes in the morning, 3 minutes in the evening. That's 6 minutes out of your day. We're going to do that. They're either compliant or not. I deal with people who don't listen to me, and I deal with people who listen to me. They come back in. I wish we could deadlift, but you didn't do your homework. We got 10 minutes of this frou-frou stuff to do, but then you're going to deadlift. If we could start with deadlifts, you'd be through quicker, or we'd have more room for other exercises. You're limiting this workout, not me. All right? I'm following principles and rules of program design. I will not put fitness on dysfunction. Okay? Now, any big amount of stress we put on her will probably make her lose this pattern. Why does somebody lose this pattern in the first place? You can look this up. You can go to the work of Dr. Vladimir Yanda, and you can see things called upper and lower cross syndromes. When people quit using their glutes, they start using their low back. When people quit using their abs, they start using their hip flexors. It's called a lower cross syndrome. The glutes don't work when they're supposed to, and the hip flexor's on too much. It's not a weakness problem. It's not a length problem. Okay? If I create length right here, I didn't add strength back here, and the minute you step on this leg without a good glute, your body goes, hey, hip flexor, you got to come back on because you're the only thing holding me up. So what we do is try to break the cycle. We trick her core into engaging a little bit before, and look how high that leg goes. Simply basically loading the core in that pattern. Now, I didn't do side planks and I didn't do crunches because that's not the kind of core load she needs. Flat on her back, stabilizing her pelvis, learning to lift her leg. Okay? Now, her abs should naturally fire a little bit more when she lifts her legs, but somewhere in her workout, in her routine, in her injury, in her lifestyle, or in her desk job, she lost that timing sequence. See, the minute we make it harder here, it gets softer back here. But you're not going to change one without the other. So instead of us basically turning her into a kinesiology project and saying, well, we're going to work the abs today, lengthen the hamstrings tomorrow, fire the glutes the day after that, we're training patterns, not muscles. We're breaking bad patterns and replacing them with good patterns. And believe me, all this is a party trick. It will get her legs moving better. But when I stand her up and become a strength coach again and say, we're going to put some deadlifts on that, then it's going to lock in. She's going to use that same level pelvis, that same lengthened hip flexor, that same better back position to do that deadlift. The deadlift is what makes the difference. And I'm not going to let you swing a kettlebell in front of me if you can't do a deadlift. Now, because we've been doing this for a while, we set out some recipes for you. You are absolutely welcome to change her leg raise any way you can. In the back of the movement book, I literally give you a bunch of scenarios. Somebody coming out of rehab, somebody with a bad pattern, exactly how we basically deconstruct and reconstruct the pattern. But any movement screen pattern that you take from a 1 to a 2 in the prep part of the session, now we can load it. So imagine this. I got 40 people to deal with. They all do 12 minutes of the exact same prep, or I put them in 4 platoons. And the people who need that do that. And the people who need a lot more T-spine mobility do that. And the people who basically have jacked ankles and need to learn how to squat again are doing that. Now the 12 minutes actually makes a difference. I don't just want a physiological warm-up for your cells. I need a motor control warm-up. I need a movement behavior warm-up. So now, if I platoon my problems, everybody who screens like her is doing that for 12 minutes. Then everybody comes back to the workout a more homogeneous group. They're all moving a little bit better because we attack each weak link. So we've often basically thought that because we're responsible for 40 people and we got to train 40 people, that we can't treat them like individuals. Hey, we learn to shoot in groups, not one-on-one, right? And this is not nearly as dangerous as shooting something. So my point is, I can platoon your problems, bring you back together for the smoke, cool you down back in your platoon. So that is the way I don't take any extra time. The front end responsibility, you baseline everybody, okay? So there is gonna have to be a screening day so you know who goes where. And the way you will justify the next time you screen is when you finish with that group, you will screen them again. You'll also screen their performance. You got it? Got twos. All right, give that guy a hand because I didn't do that. I was just talking, okay?